2025. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearings. There are 5 cases on the agenda. 4 board members are present for a quorum. Mr. Hoffman is not here today. The first case on the agenda is RPC 1701302A. The property listed, its address is on North Taft Street. Ms. Ross has asked on the 16th to withdraw the case. I assume, Mr. Burns, you have no objection to that?
No, no objections.
Okay, so I will move to withdraw. Do I have a second? Mr. Mendez is a second. All in favor of the withdrawal?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's 4-0 unanimous. That case has been withdrawn. Okay, thank you, Mr. Burns. Okay, we have Ms. Shuttlesworth and Mr. Harmon. Okay, next case on the agenda is RPC 1702402A at 1800 14th Street North. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. Annetta, good morning. So this is the Gables Point 14 apartments. It's located just north of Highway 50 at Courthouse. It's kind of as you go around that bend right after coming around the cemetery there. It's a 370 unit apartment building. 11% of those units are committed affordable. The current assessment for this property values it at more than $407,000 per unit. Now, there's 2 issues with the assessment in the county's test column. The first is the vacancy and collection loss rate. The second issue is the capitalization rate. For the vacancy and collection loss, the data is pretty clear. Looking at the operating history of the property, we see in 2022, vacancy and collection loss was 7.7%. 2023, 6.4%. And then last year, 2024, it was 5.2%. This represents a 3-year average vacancy and collection loss rate of 6.5%. So all 3 of the past 3 years have had vacancy and collection in excess of the county's assumed rate of 5%. That came in at an average across those 3 years of 6.5%. So this illustrates one of the drawbacks of mass appraisal methodology. This is one of the reasons that the state requires an appeal process. Here, applying the state statute for residential properties, which requires actual income and expenses, including vacancy and collection loss, be utilized in the assessment, we see that the county's mass appraisal 5% vacancy and collection loss rate is simply too low based on this property's historical average of 6.5%. Next, the assessment and the test column both assume a cap rate that is not supported nor derived from any market data. The county states they relied on investor surveys and market sales to develop their cap rate for this property. However, upon closer examination, once you start to dig into those claims, we see that this simply cannot be the case. Now, starting with the surveys, I do want to share my screen. I know I've spoken to this. I just want to illustrate it as well in case you're like me and a visual learner. So these are loaded cap rates. The county always presents a loaded cap rate in their assessments. I'm presenting loaded cap rates for apples to apples comparison. So these are all loaded with the tax rate. They're all loaded with the replacement reserve rate. This is the county's methodology. So you can see here, these are the 3 surveys that we've been told time and again that the county relied on to develop their cap rates. The low end of each one of these surveys, and this is a little bit odd that in 2025, well, this was Q3 2024, excuse me, but Q3 2024, all 3 of these surveys had the exact same low end cap rate. They all came in at 6.233%. You know, that doesn't happen often. There's usually a little bit of variation. Typically, they'll track pretty closely together. But for all 3 of them to come in at exactly the same low end rate, that's a consensus. That consensus is that the low end of cap rates for this region, for this property type, is 6.233%. Now, on this property, the county has used a cap rate of 5.581%. You can see that's significantly below the investor survey consensus of 6.233%. Now, there's simply no way of making an adjustment to get that low below these surveys. The surveys don't provide for any methodology that says, well, this is the low end of the range unless X, Y, or Z. There's none of that. They say this is the low end of the range. The county told us we relied on that survey. And they somehow came up well below those surveys. We have not heard an explanation as to the discrepancy, but it's there. It's there and it's very clear. Now, moving next to sales, and I'll tie this in why this is important in just a moment, so bear with me. But as to sales, the county states that sales in 2024 support the cap rates for this property. That's not the case. If you look at actual comparable properties, they do not support the cap rate the county has used for this property. This property, keep in mind, 370 units, 11% of which are committed affordable. Looking at actual comparable sales from last year, we see a couple, 2121 Westmoreland sold at a cap rate of greater than 7%. 955 South Columbus sold at more than 6.3%, 6.3%, in line with the investor surveys here. The sales the county relies on include non-comparable properties, which is likely where those cap rates came from that they're saying support their cap rate of 5.58 on this property. They list sales of properties with 10 units, 9 units, 8 units, 4 units. Those are mom and pop properties. Those are not any way, shape, or form comparable to a 370 unit multifamily property. When you look at the actual comparable properties that sold, they're well above these investor surveys. They're at 6.3%, at 7%. So every data point that we have says the county's cap rate is simply out of line. So what does this do to the assessment? Why does this matter? Well, this is an issue because it results in a value greater than fair market value. And how can we know this? For this property, we actually have a sale comp that occurred just last year, just across the highway from this property. The Alcott sold for $345,000 per unit in 2024. That compares with the current assessment for the subject property of $407,000 per unit. So $62,000 per unit in difference by using a non-market cap rate. That's an 18% premium to the sale comp across the highway. Now that sale comp, it's important to note, has higher rents than the subject. Higher rents than the subject, yet it sold for $62,000 less per unit than the subject. Now, it is across the highway, I've mentioned that. We can account for that. We can make the county's metro adjustment to get an apples to apples comparison. Doing that results in a sale comp per unit sale price of $355,000 per unit. Again, that compares to the current assessment on this property, $407,000 per unit. Essentially, by not accounting for the subject property's actual vacancy and collection loss, and by not using a market cap rate, we end up with an assessment that's $52,000 per unit higher than a sale comp right next to the subject, despite the subject actually having lower rents than that sale comp. So this is exactly the case why we have the appeal process and why we review individual assessments. We detect errors where the county's mass appraisal system is simply not set up to accurately assess individual properties. Here, the specific property we see its average vacancy and collection loss of 6.5% over the past 3 years, has 11% committed affordable. It's a 370 unit property. You can't use a cap rate from an 8 unit sale and apply it to this property. You have to go to the comparable, the appropriate cap rate sources. Those are the sales. Doing so results in a value closer to the sale comp that occurred just last year, just across the street. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, good morning, board. Good morning, Jordan. Again, this is clearly a cap rate issue. Originally, I wasn't going to add the test columns as our 2025 NOI was significantly below the NOI that reported for 2024. The only one reason why I did that was to separate the market units from the cap units. My hypothetical tested figures in columns F1 and F2 are very low, as the board can see. And I did that intentionally just to eliminate any kind of potential doubts and to demonstrate that even with such low tested NOI, our tested value was still above the value we used in 2025 valuation. In respect to the cap rates, I have said that on many occasions, and I will say it again, I apologize for repeating myself. When we were developing those cap rates, we relied on third quarter commercial real estate investor surveys. We relied on RERC, PwC, CBRE, and they showed the range. So for example, the PwC for the Mid-Atlantic region showed a cap rate range of 5% to 6%. We also utilized the sales within the Arlington County, the sales that we were able to verify. And they all occurred in 2024. These sales produced an unloaded cap rate range from 4% to 5.8%. And the list of those sales were all included in our guideline book for 2025. And with all that, I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No? Okay, Ms. Shuttlesworth, any final comments in your minute closing?
Yes, thank you. So again, our 2025 NOI we used in valuation was significantly below the NOI they reported in 2024. And I asked the board to confirm our 2025 assessment at $150,651,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So the county's presentation just proves the importance of utilizing a market cap rate. This is of the utmost importance because as they've shown, you can arrive at an NOI that may be reflective of the property's actual reporting history. But the final value, if you use a non-market cap rate, the final value is still $52,000 greater than a sale comp right across the street. Now that sale comp was middle of last year. The sale comp had great higher rents. And yet the assessment methodology, by imputing an unloaded cap rate that's lower than what the market says, you still arrive at values that are $52,000 greater than the sale comp right across the street. That's a 15% premium to a sale comp that the market just valued for us. So keep in mind the cap rates Ms. Shuttlesworth mentioned, the survey cap rates, those are all unloaded rates, the 5 to 7%. Once you load them, you get to the 6.233%. For apples to apples, we do need to either load all of them or unload the county's rates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board members. Where are folks on this? Mr. Penaranda? You turn your microphone on, sir.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, it's like pretty much in any other case that we've seen, the numbers are there. I know Mr. Harmon pointed out to the vacancy and collections being lower than, I guess, the previous year. But overall, the numbers are showing that, it's pretty close to what their operating numbers were last year. And going down the line, even expenses that the county gave them are higher than it should have been, really. So I'm okay with the current assessment the way it is. I don't see anything. I think it's low to start with, so I'm okay with it.
Okay, Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, it's essentially, a slight increase year over year. It's almost flat. I don't know what the percentage increase is, but I certainly don't think it went down in value year over year. So I'm okay with it.
Anything different, Mr. Yates?
No, I'm fine with it. The 2024 numbers, the county's being nice about some of this in their projections.
Okay. All right, would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll move that we confirm the assessment. That's $150,651,000.
I'll second it.
Okay, a motion and a second by Mr. Yates. All in favor? Aye, opposed. Okay, it's unanimous. The county is confirmed at $150,651,000 even. Thank you. I understand Mr. Peralta's not here, and Ms. Kelly is going to present the last three cases. Or not the last three, I'm sorry, the next case. Okay, so RPC 1700101 at 1000 Wilson Boulevard. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this is one of the Twin Towers in Roslyn. It's a 565,000 square foot office building built in 1981. Now, we've previously discussed the Virginia Constitution requirements of assessments to be at fair market value. We've discussed how the state of Virginia defines fair market value. We've also gone through how the state directs us to ascertain fair market value. We've also gone through, how the concept of equalization is not a safe harbor for assessments that are in excess of fair market value. That interplay when equalization and fair market value are in conflict, the state has said that the taxpayer is entitled to the lower of those two. So if equalization results in a value that's greater than fair market value, you have to go with the lower fair market value. We've also discussed how we're reviewing assessments on individual properties and not doing a mass appraisal review for every assessment in the county. So building off of this prior discussion, I now want to turn to the Virginia Enabling Statute for the Boards of Equalization. This is the statute that discusses what the Board of Equalization is empowered to do. This is Virginia Code Section 58.1-3381, and it states that the board may determine any and all such petitions, and by order may decrease any assessment upon its own motion. This code does not make any stipulation that any decreases have to be in accordance with the county's methodology, have to be acceptable to the county. The board can make decreases to get to fair market value. The enabling statute allows that. It doesn't require changes to only be to certain variables that the county deems are appropriate. So, this does not, again, place any artificial restrictions on the board's actions. For our purposes, what it means is that when the county argues for equalization purposes, the board cannot move on certain variables. This is actually found nowhere in the statute. In fact, the enabling statute specifically states the opposite. Specifically, in plain text, it states that the board may decrease the assessment upon its own motion. Again, no mention is given to a change in the assessment being predicated on the county's approval or being within the county's mass appraisal framework. We're reviewing a single property. The board's enabled to make changes to that assessment in order to get to fair market value. So knowing how the board's entitled to act, I now want to discuss the cap rate that this assessment has assumed for this property. State law requires the cap rate be determined in accordance with generally accepted appraisal practice. Once a cap rate is selected utilizing generally accepted appraisal practice, it is given a presumption of correctness. The presumption of correctness can be overcome by law by showing either manifest error or a complete disregard for all controlling evidence. In this instance, we have both of those. We have manifest error in how the county selected the cap rate for this property. We also have a complete disregard for all controlling evidence. So working in order, how did the county determine the cap rate for this property? Well, share my screen here to show where the county's cap rates are compared to the Corpax report. So this is their expert report that they commission typically each year. The county relied heavily on this, as we've seen in their testimony to the board. Essentially, they did this last year too. You go to the Corpax report, you see the conclusions, you see the low end of the range. You grab that. That's one sale that represents the low end of the range. You grab that, and then you just make these adjustments based on that low end for effective age. So here's the low end of the Corpax range, representing one sale. You can see there's a 10 basis point deduction for a newer effective age, then a 25 basis point. They're all very clean and even, 20, 40, 65, 90, 1.6, 2.25. Those adjustments were made. It appears the data shows those adjustments were made based on the low end of the Corpax range. Now, as we've discussed previously too, and as is included in the board book, that sale that represents that low end of the Corpax range, that was not a market transaction. That was not anything that was marketed. It wasn't bid on. It was an owner going to their largest tenant in the building who they knew wanted to control the asset. That tenant was also flush with a new round of funding. It was a startup company. And they said, do you want to buy it for this price? No. The buyer said yes. And that's the cap rate that the county has now used to derive the cap rate for the subject property. That is manifest error. That is not in accordance with generally accepted appraisal practice. One, you do not use one sale to develop a cap rate. Two, you don't rely on a non-market, non-comparable sale to derive a cap rate. So that's manifest error. Looking at the rest of the controlling evidence, you have the rest of the Corpax report was not utilized to develop this cap rate. You've also heard from the county that this is just one data point. It appears to be the primary data point based on where the numbers come out here. But if we go to the other sources that Dreas cited, the Corpax, PwC, RERC, CoStar, CBRE, if you look at all of these, and what we've done here is we've come up with an average. So if you look at Corpax, PwC, RERC, CoStar, CBRE, these are all the sources that the county says we also derived it from these. Well, here's the average. The average low end is even higher than Corpax. It's 9.4%. That compares to the county's low end, 8.25. High end is 12.09 versus 10.75. On average, the county's cap rates are a full 120 basis points below what all of their data points looked at collectively state. So here again, there's simply no nexus to the market. That is ignoring all controlling evidence. So we know that it appears based on the data that one sale was utilized, the low end of the Corpax cap rate, non-market sale. That's manifest error. No licensed appraiser would use that as their sole source. But even if you go to these alleged, other sources that were purportedly used, they don't support that either. You can see that they're well above what the county has applied for this property. So, that's the cap rate argument on this property. It's not, it is manifest error. It is ignoring all controlling evidence. It does need an adjustment. We've provided an adjustment based on the Corpax study, using the study as a whole and excluding the non-market sale. Now, as a final note, I do want to mention briefly the county's 2024 reconstructed column labeled E1. Now, this case is very illustrative of the utility of these reconstructed columns that the county creates from time to time and the errors that result in these values. For this property, I'll ask that you compare the county's reconstructed column with the property's reported 2024 financials. This property was stabilized at a stabilized occupancy of 83% throughout 2024. Yet the county's reconstructed NOI is $4 million greater than what that stabilized 2024 NOI was. So that's the disconnect between these reconstructed columns. They result in paper values that have no basis in reality. There's no way this property, already stabilized, can just achieve another $4 million out of thin air. So going forward, when you see
Time is up.
reconstructed columns, just please take it with a grain of salt. It's a paper value. It's not reflective of reality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kelly for the county, please.
Thank you. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Mr. Harmon. I just wanted to just talk about the subject property a little bit more. Again, this is the Towers. It's located at 1000 Wilson Boulevard. It does have an effective age of 1995 and was built in 1981, as noted. It is a LEED Gold certified building. It does have a number of amenities, including a little over 55,000 square feet of retail space. It has on-site retail, dining, a rooftop terrace that does have monumental views, and a 12,000 square foot fitness center. It is noted to have stunning views of the Potomac River and into Washington, D.C., and is within walking distance of the Roslyn Metro Station. The 2025 assessment versus the 2024 assessment, it did decline 4%. When you look at page 3, which is the summary sheet for the county, I'll give you a chance to get there. I'm just going to walk across the screen a little bit using identifying the columns by their letters, A, B, C, D, and E. If you look at operating year 2021, look at the line 1, which refers to office rents. That's leased office rents. What's reported in these columns does not include the vacancy. It includes the actuals or the net income there. Look across the columns for column A, column B, column C. The county then creates a projection or projects the income for that property for the year. So we projected this income, and then in 2025, when the property appeals, we look at what they submit to us, and that's what's in column E and in column E1. E does not include the vacant space. And so therefore we did a reconstruction, or Mr. Peralta did a reconstruction in column E1 and included that vacant space, which he actually used the appellant's or the agent's numbers, which from column G. So that number was plugged in, similar to how we treat all the other properties when we value them. We make sure that if we are receiving actual income, that we are using gross potential, and then we are also basically including that number, backing that number back into what we would contribute to be the gross potential income. So in column E1 is a reconstruction and includes that vacant space. If you compare the GPI, which is on line 7 across the screen, you'll see that there is a consistent increase across the board. And in January of 2025, the county was slightly higher than the projected one for 2023. In 2024, the reporting is higher than what the department projected as the gross potential income for this property. In fact, I believe it is 7.1% higher than what the county projected for this property as of January 1. The property is also experiencing some vacancy. It's not one of the higher end vacancies as some of the other properties that we've heard. It's a 15%, it had 15% vacancy. We allowed for 18% in this case. It did result in an additional, I believe it was $894,000 of as far as dollar values. And according to Mr. Peralta, it accounted for 16,929 square feet of additional space as being vacant. Going down to the operating expenses, still going across the board here. There was noted to be an average expense of 5.9%. Looking across the board, the county allowed for 5.7% 7% as far as operating expenses. For NOI, that is lower than 2021, 2022, and 2023, and the reconstruction. The reconstruction, again, is just there to compare apples to apples, as I stated in one of the prior cases and this one as well. So it is necessary for us to do. I also want to note that there was some changes, some things I wanted to note, and one being the total NLA, which is noted at the top column under the year. The total NLA for the property for the department, which we valued it for, was $563,494. It's slightly less than what is in column E1. And we do acknowledge that there was a slight difference in the vacancy square footage that was used for the county versus what was noted in the reconstruction. However, we do believe that the additional monies that was used for the 18% versus the 15% vacancy does account for that. And I would recommend that the board members confirm this value as fair and equitable at $240,453,800. And I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? No, I just will ask one thing then for the county. Ms. Kelly, can you speak to, Mr. Harmon brought up the point of using the only one sale and in fact, a non-market sale in setting cap rate. Do you want to say anything regarding that?
We've had the discussion before regarding the cap rate analysis, and the department does not just rely on one metric. We did not just use one sale. As I noted in one of the other cases with Mr. Harmon, the department does rely on a number of resources when we conduct our capitalization rate analysis. We did have the Corpax report in addition to the publications that were mentioned earlier, in addition to looking at the data that we have for the prior year. So we have to internally make an adjustment to the cap rates based on all of those data points. And this is something that is done within the department using the tools, the resources that are available to make it, we make adjustments to the cap rates based on that. There were limited sales. We're aware of what's going on in the office market. And so therefore we have to dissect and use the data points that we have and make it what we feel to be fair adjustments to the cap rate. And in this case, we did actually make increase the cap rates for the office market due to the market that we're having. I don't really have a comment specifically for that particular sale because I don't believe the county relied on one sale. Again, we use various numbers of data points and we have to make an internal adjustment based on the data that we see in the market, in addition to our cap rates that were in place as of last year.
Okay. All right, any other final comments or questions? No? Okay, Ms. Kelly, if you take a minute then to wrap up, please.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Again, I am looking at the property summary sheet. We didn't perform a test because it's really obvious that the NOI and for this particular property that is not experiencing a extremely high vacancy was fairly valued as of January 1. In fact, the value in column D is lower than 2021, 2022, and 2024. And I encourage or recommend that the Board of Equalization confirm the value is fair and equitable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, thank you. So looking at the DREA's reconstructed column, you'll notice that that doesn't include, it adds income for the vacant space, but then it doesn't take a vacancy and collection loss to offset that. If you do that, which the county does on their assessments, it's their common methodology. So you take the 18%, you get to an NOI of $20,140,000. So to have any utility, that column E1 needs to include vacancy and collection. The county's holding that out, saying we had to do this reconstruction. We had to get an accurate portrayal of the property. Okay, now apply that assessment methodology to that reconstructed column, apply the vacancy and collection loss rate of 18%, you get an NOI of $20,140,000, more than $1.4 million below the current assessment. Apply the county's cap rate to that, you get a value of $224,328,000. So just to be intellectually consistent, apply that. We ask that you apply the vacancy and collection loss to the county's reconstructed column. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, it's just among the board. Go ahead, Mr. Mendez.
Sure. It looks like the NOI is pretty consistent, even in 2021. I'm surprised where it was considered and where it is now. Year over year, it's up, but the value's down. It looks like they have less vacant square footage, which is great. I really don't see any issues with the assessment personally.
Yeah, I don't feel the appellant made an argument that I'm willing to accept on the NOI. I mean, I look at in his pro forma, the income is understated, then he goes and puts the vacant in there. So, and then the whole argument of, take a look at this and apply a different practice to, the test column. I mean, it's right there consistent with the stable income that the property's generated. And in fact, actually a little bit lower. So, I agree with you, Mr. Mendez. I don't see an issue as far as the NOI at all. So other folks, Mr. Yates, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I looked at the expenses a little bit and comparing them and the rate of expense I took just to see what it did, I took the 2024 expense number from the appellant and applied that to the county. That brought it down to it's 20,913,805. Slight difference. But when I applied the county's cap rate, you're looking, unless I did something wrong, 232,945. That's, I think, a too big of drop, but I do think the expenses are slightly off in what the county's projected. I just don't feel comfortable in averaging expenses going back to 2021, knowing that expenses have done nothing but go up.
Right, and I would agree with you, but when you look at the NOI is consistent. I mean, if you look at the original assessment, it's lower than what they reported.
Right,
Without reporting potential income off a vacancy. So that's understated. So I agree with you. And if that was the only issue, I'd say, the expenses are a little bit low. But when you look at the NOI, it's in line with what the property is producing. So I have difficulty increasing the expenses.
It dropped the NOI about 600,000 by changing the expenses. And it put it more in line between the 23 and 24 number. But to drop the total value down to 232, I thought it's just too much.
Yeah, I wouldn't support that. Mr. Penaranda?
No, I agree with you, Mary, that if that was the only thing, maybe, we would have made a change. But I think it's overall going up all the way from the top. Mr. Harmon brought the point that maybe using the same 18% of vacancy in collections, it would make a difference. But to begin with, the vacancy and collection numbers are higher to begin with the county use. So if that wasn't higher, I probably would have considered what Mr. Yates is suggesting. But I'm okay with the assessment the way it is right now.
Okay. Anything different, Mr. Mendez? All right, then I'm going to move to confirm the county. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Mendez. Motion and a second to confirm. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it is unanimous. The county's confirmed at 240,453,800. Thank you both. Okay, now we have Ms. Shuttlesworth back again. There we go. Okay, next, RPC Economic Unit 2700108A at 1100 South Thomas Street. Mr. Harmon, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Yes, thank you. So this is the Barcroft Apartments. It consists of 1,335 units of committed affordable units. It's spread across 52 separate buildings. It's also restricted to 60% of AMI. Now, when you hear committed affordable, there's different levels. Commonly, you'll see 80% of AMI, area median income. It's what they're restricted to. Fees are all restricted to 60% of AMI. And that's through a 99-year covenant that the owner put on this property when they purchased it. Now, this property, again, spread across 52 separate buildings. That increases the maintenance cost and the wear and tear on the buildings. It was initially built in 1948, had not been updated since the 80s. This property, I'm sure you're familiar with it, it's at George Mason and Columbia Pike. It's directly across the street from that Harris Teeter that just closed this past Sunday. Now, for this property, I do want to start by looking at the cap rate. The assessment assumes a loaded cap rate of 7%. This is exactly the same cap rate as 2024. Now, why is that important? Well, looking at all other multifamily cap rates, we see that the county increased cap rates by 30 basis points year over year. That's all market rate units. The county guidelines increased 30 basis points. All committed affordable properties, except for garden units, the county increased by 30 basis points. This property, the county did not make any change to the cap rate. Now, there were no sales that would support no change to garden committed affordable units specifically. There's no market data to say everything should have gone up 30 basis points except garden market affordable units. There's no analysis that's been provided as required by law to show that this was the one segment of the multifamily market that should have no change in the cap rate. Looking at this property specifically, we see not only is it 100% committed affordable, but again, it's 100% committed affordable at that lower rate of 60% AMI. That makes the property even more risky. That risk needs to be reflected in the cap rate. So if we're looking at this specific property and knowing every other property in the county had a cap rate increase, this property should have increased even further. It's even riskier because it's 100% committed affordable. It's 100% committed affordable at the lower AMI of 60%. Further, this owner has an agreement with Arlington County to not raise rents more than 3% annually and to come in below this rate when they're able to, or when a tenant is able to show that they cannot afford that much of an increase. That further restricts the revenue potential of this property, which further increases the riskiness of a return on investment. That is all reflected in the cap rate. Considering the nature of this property, one, it's massive, 1,335 units spread across 52 buildings. Two, 100% committed affordable at 60% AMI. Three, hasn't been updated since the 80s. It's entirely inappropriate to use a cap rate of only 7% as the assessment for this property has done for this tax year. Now, why is that inappropriate other than, cap rates increased on every other multifamily property in the county and this one is more deserving of an increase than anything else? Well, going back to our discussion a couple of cases ago, showing those loaded survey cap rates at a low end of 6.233%. That low end represents new, well-located, well-amenitized properties at market rents. This property meets none of that criteria. It's aging. It's rent restricted. It's in a tertiary location. It doesn't have any amenities. It's certainly deserving of a cap rate greater than just a 77 basis point premium. We've proposed a conservative cap rate of just 7.68%. This compares with recent 2024 sales of market rate units that were coming in at 7%. That's a 68 basis point premium to those market sales that we saw in the market last year. That's 2121 Westmoreland. That sold at greater than 7% cap rate. That property was a 2010 build. It's primarily market rate units and it's metro accessible. This property is nowhere near metro. Again, this property, 100% committed affordable, 60% AMI, cannot raise rents greater than 3% a year per an agreement with the county. It's located nowhere near a metro station. It's lost a major amenity it had across the street with the grocery store. Clearly, these two properties do not have the same risk and return values. Yet the assessment for the subject property assumes just that this property, with all of the rent restrictions and all of the issues that it faces, has the exact same risk and return profile as that sale comp, the newer 2010 build market rate units that's within walking distance of a metro. Clearly, these are not the same risk profile, the same return profile, the same attractiveness from an investment standpoint. Our proposed cap rate is a modest increase that is based on the same investor surveys the county claims they have relied on. Making this adjustment brings the assessment more in line with the fair market value of this property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Shuttlesworth for the county, please.
Yes, thank you. So first of all, let me say this. This was not an easy case to process as there's a lot of going on with this property. The owner purchased it back in December 2021 for $425 million. We have it assessed for a little bit over $153 million, which is less than a half what they pay for it. This sale included 62 acres of land with over 50 garden-style apartment buildings with a total of 1,335 residential units. There's also a small portion of retail that belongs to this economic unit. The buyer secured two loans. One was for $150 million. That was provided by the county with very attractive loan terms at 1% interest rate for the first 5 years and 2.5% interest right thereafter. And he also secured another $150 million loan that was granted by Amazon. They have a special fund dedicated to the affordable housing. We are not aware of the terms of this loan, but perhaps Mr. Harmon can speak to it. Mr. Lynch agreed to preserve the affordability of some of the existing units for 99 years. The annual rent increases are capped at 3%, up to the maximum 60% of AMI. 134 units will serve the households earning up to 30% AMI. The long-term planning, which includes both rehabilitation of some of the existing units and adding on a brand new 6 and 8+ story apartment buildings, continues. According to the long-range planning committee meeting held in April 2024, which I was able to observe, the renovation of some of the existing buildings are broken into 4 separate projects and include 15 buildings with a total of 359 units. The county is actively working with the developer on land feasibility analysis. There was a special task force assigned to keep track on the major milestones. There have been ongoing community meetings and roundtable talks. The main goal is to achieve the balance between the conservation and redevelopment. Now, the board can determine that the new apartment buildings, including the market units, are yet to be built, and they were not there as of January 1, and that is correct. I just shared the information because it was discussed during the long-range planning committee held in June 2024. And another reason why I did that was to just illustrate to the board why this case is so complex. It is very difficult to project the potential rent. It is very difficult to project expenses. The renovation work on the existing units is a moving target. We are not sure what was the percentage of the completion as of January 1, 2025. I did inspect this property last year, and the renovation was already ongoing. The property manager at that time was not able to even give me percentage of completion to date. She was only able to tell me what the overall goal was, and that was to have these units that belong to conservation zone renovated within the next 5 to 6 years. So I do hope that the board can see why this case is a fairly complex case. When we consider the income approach, I do not think that the income approach is in this case, should be the only approach used. That is why I provided the sales comps and the assessment comps. Some might argue these are not perfect sales comps because they are located in DC, in Alexandria. We did not have recent sales within Arlington, so I chose these surrounding competing market areas. The most recent multifamily sale in Arlington with affordable units was in August 2022. That was 6172 Wilson Boulevard. The property had 110 units and it sold for over 30 million, which is 275,000 per unit. The subject property is currently assessed at 114,000 per unit. Then again, when you look at both the sales comps and the assessment comps, I think we are more than conservative with our 2025 assessment. Even when you just consider the above stabilized vacancy, which is triggered by these renovations and temporary tenant relocations, and our assessment increased just by 1%. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Mendez.
For the appellant, why did the owner agree to only a 3% annual cap increase? Did they get anything out of that? Was that to get the favorable loan or?
That was all part of getting those favorable loans. So the purchase price, before it was purchased, it was market rate units. That's why that purchase price is so high, is because they had to compete with other market rate investors. And so they came up with a conglomerate, Arlington County, Amazon, part of their affordable housing fund. They said, hey, how can we target this massive, that was part of it. It's 1,300 units. They said this can have a huge impact on our goals of affordable housing in the county. Let's get it. How do we make this work? And so they came up with this, solution. They said, Amazon will contribute, this type of loan, this type of grant. Arlington County will contribute this. We'll put a 99-year restrictive covenant on it, restricting it to 60% AMI. We'll also agree to these annual increases, limits on annual increases. So it's all part of the overall project. It was a partnership between these three
Okay.
entities.
Thank you.
I have
All right,
one.
Mr. Mendez, go.
Yeah, for the county, is there any special attention shown to the fact that there's a 3% cap on increases in the assessment? And are there any other properties like this in the county where there's a rent increase cap?
Not to the best of my knowledge right now, and certainly not of the size of the property. This is the largest affordable complex in Arlington County. This is the only one sale I am aware of where the county provided such attractive terms of the loan. So I'm not aware of another. Maybe Deidre can speak to it.
No, I just wanted to note that, I mean, all CAF properties are treated similarly, and we do receive what those salary ranges are, what the increase in rents are per year. So we do base our values off of that. So there is a metrics behind that. It's not the only property that is a committed affordable or that has or that are the rents are guided by some sort of guidelines established by income.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, Ms. Shuttlesworth, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, so thank you. So when you look at those affordable units from a developer's perspective, you are planning your new project development and you're doing your feasibility analysis, your sensitivity analysis, you will quickly notice that the more affordable units you include in your new project, your projected key performance indicators will go down. Your IRR will go down, cash on cash, DCR, and this is real. But here we are dealing with already existing property that clearly, despite the high vacancy triggered triggered by the temporary tenant relocation, it does generate net profit. This property did not show net loss. These units are not worthless, and we have them assessed at $115,000 per unit, way below what these units are selling for in DC market area. And Alexandria and DC are very similar locations, considering proximity to major employment centers, major entertainment centers, or transportation centers. And again, this assessment increased only by 1%. Some of these units were already renovated when I inspected them last year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, if you take a minute to wrap up.
Yes, thank you. So I don't recall touring any of the renovated units, and my notes show that they planned them for 2025 and going forward. With that, we've seen on the prior multifamily property that we saw today, the county was well below the actual NOI of the prior year at that property. We've seen that consistently across multifamily properties. On this one, the assessment's NOI is 262,000 greater than what the property actually achieved in 2024. Touching again upon that cap rate, there was a cap rate change of 30 basis points year over year to every multifamily property, every property type in the county or the guidelines, except for garden style committed affordable units. There's no basis for that. There aren't sales that say garden styles sell for higher than mid-rise or high-rise. I don't know if it was an oversight or what, but we asked for at a minimum a 30 basis point increase to bring that year over year change in line. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. All right, it's just among the board. I'll start on this. I guess I'm troubled a little bit over the size and complexity of this. When I look at the actual income, which we have the ability to use actual income and expenses, I think that the assessment is a little bit high. I probably could create an argument that I don't think it's any higher than last year. But if you take what, trying to use the columns, column E, the actual operating income reported, and you break out the portion that the county is saying is the retail, and just use the balance of that and cap it out at the 7%, it ends up at 148,635.14. I don't think it's gone down, but I don't think it's gone up from last year, based on just the size of it, the economy, and the fact that the Harris Teeter are closing. That's a huge draw to, people who need affordable housing units to be walking distance to a, grocery store. They're not going to have that anymore. So I think that's got even more impact. So, I don't know where everybody else is, but I would be kind of leaning towards going back to last year's assessment. Mr. Yates?
I did something simple just to see rents are capped at 3%. Increases. I looked at what's 3% over last year's assessment. And it came out to 51,949,183. I mean, it's not taking expense issues or anything else, just what's a 3% increase over what their revenue potential is?
Right, but that's 3% on everything being rented.
Yes. The same as I just took their assessment. What's 3% increase?
And so you came up with what? 151?
151, 949, 183.
Well, that's close to what I,
Yeah, their rent's
Yeah.
capped. They
Yeah.
can't do more.
all right, the other folks? Go ahead, Mr. Mendez.
Yeah, I kind of would agree that the property is a little bit riskier with the whole AMI, 60% of AMI, and I think up to 30% is what we heard too. So I don't know if I'll get any support for this, but I did bump up the cap rate in column D by 0.5% just because this property is so unique. There's a 3% cap on the increase per year. I don't think there's really anything else that the county mentioned that was similar. So I did that and I came up with a final value of 143,61,800.
Okay, Mr. Penaranda? Turn your microphone on, sir.
I would be fine going back to last year. I think that makes a little more sense than, I think that drop that Mr. Mendes is suggesting is just too low. I know it's risky, but it's still one of the properties that is not going to run out of tenants. That they're always going to be looking for, affordable units, and this is one of the ones that has the most. And I've never really seen that it's been a problem to occupy over there. So I'll be okay with that going back to last year.
Okay, Mr. Mendez?
Yeah, I just want to say if we go back to last year's number, I feel like we'll hear this case again next year and potentially the following year. Maybe things will be different then, but I don't know. I feel like this is a very unique case. So again, I don't think I'm going to get support for what I'm looking for, but I wouldn't go back to last year's number if I had to vote.
I mean, we hear
Well, it would be
cases.
lower than this year.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I said it would be lower than this year. I mean, you're
Right.
saying it, right, okay.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Yates, where are you? Because if
I could
the
go to-
motion doesn't carry, it's gonna.
Right,
revert anyway.
no. I could go back to last year's too. It's just, I mean, the income's capped. There's no way around it.
Right.
The value's got to be kind of following that same trend.
All right. Then what I'm gonna do is reduce it, make a motion to reduce it back to 151,690,400 based on last year's assessment, the risk of the property, and the loss of the walkable grocery for the tenants. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion is second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, so it's 3-1 without Mr. Mendez. And Mr. Mendez's no is because he wanted it lower, not higher. Okay. Thank you both. And the last one, same players, RPC 1900304A at 3201 10th Street North. Mr. Harmon, you can take your 8 minutes and tell us about this property.
Yes, thank you. So we actually filed this appeal for the Bingham Center that we heard a couple of weeks ago. We did let the county know that as well. So I'm not sure why we're being asked to present on this. We presented our appeal at the Bingham Center a couple of weeks ago. So I don't have anything further to add to that case.
Okay, Ms. Shuttlesworth?
Yes, thank you. So this is site plan 465, commonly known as Joyce Motors. It is entitled for a mixed-use apartment complex with 240 residential units and 3,800 square foot of retail. The plan was approved in February 2023. We notified the appellant that the supportive documents they submitted were included for another site plan, which was site plan 467. We did not receive any additional documentation regarding this site plan. Again, we assessed this site plan the same way we assessed all other site plans within the county. We performed a land study. We included 6 sales of approved site plans. And based on that study, we assessed this property at $78,000 per residential unit and $60 per FAR for the retail. And with all that being said, I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Any questions from board members? No? Okay, any final comments, Ms. Shuttlesworth?
No, again, I just asked the board to confirm the 2026 assessment. Thank you. 2025 assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harmon, do you have anything to add in the minute?
I mean, we filed a single appeal for the Bingham Center. I don't even know if we represent this property, so I'm not sure. We communicated this to the county, but that I don't have anything to say about it.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, in lieu of that and no real testimony from Mr. Harmon on behalf of the owner, which they may or may not represent, to me, there's no case. I mean, it would revert to the burden of proof is on the appellant. There's no testimony provided. So if anybody else has got anything else, ready to make a motion. All right, then I'm gonna move to confirm the county at $18,950,500. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Penaranda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county is confirmed at $18,950,500. Okay,
Thank
that
you.
completes the agenda. Mr. Harmon, if you could stay on for additional business, I don't want you to jump off. So I believe there is additional business that we'd be more than happy to hear, Mr. Dubay.
Yeah, good morning. I'm addressing extra documentation that we're requesting to add to a case tomorrow. And the RPC number is 16039-034. The case to be heard tomorrow is case 173. We provided a snapshot of the cost approach for the improvements in the case already. And that number is in the packet. It's listed in there. But what we were unable to provide due to technical difficulties with our Marshall and Swift cost estimator was just the cost breakdown of the improvements. The improvements are $744,400, and the appraiser Lori Roskin has requested just to add that cost breakdown, just supporting the value that we already have in the packet. So no changes to value or any extra information. It's just the details behind that cost approach that we're requesting to add to the packet for tomorrow's case.
Okay, and just to be keeping in line with the rules and regulations, Mr. Harmon, do you have any objection?
No objection.
Okay, all right, then Rosie, you can go ahead and email out that information that was just described to the board members for tomorrow.
Will do.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other business? No? Okay, then we will stand adjourned here at 10:05. and reconvene tomorrow morning, the 23rd at 9 a.m. in person for the board members.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.